the dirt race at Bristol. It may have taken us an extra day, but we did it. Welcome back to Left Turns Only. The dirt race at Bristol went off without a hitch pretty much. Predicted the rain on Sunday, kind of knew that was happening, which anybody can look at the forecast and predict that. So when I predicted my winner of the Bristol dirt race, I predicted the rain was going to be the winner on Sunday. First prediction I've got right all year. It's been a crazy NASCAR season this year so far. And that's the one surefire bet was spring Bristol race. It gets rained out all the time, even under the best of circumstances. So the rain got the best of it. But just on Sunday, cleaned everything up. Bruton Smith and the crew had the track running tip-top shape. Not only did they run one race, they ran two races that day. They ran the truck race, which Martin Truex Jr. absolutely dominated. And for a little bit of the Cup race, too, he dominated it as well. But we'll get into that in just a second. First off, it was highly anticipated by me, by NASCAR fans, by lapsed NASCAR fans too. People that hadn't watched NASCAR in years. They'd fallen out with the sport for one reason or another. And they decided, I'm going to come back and I'm going to watch this race. I'm excited for this race. It's different. Hasn't happened in 50 years. Let's check it out. And the general consensus from myself, what I've read online, from some friends that were there, is it was awesome. I mean, it's Bristol. Bristol's already pretty much a perfect racetrack. It's short track. It's beating and banging. It's old school. It's just absolutely great. But for them to take a risk like that and put dirt on the track, and even especially with the delay, to try to run two races in one day and try to keep the track up to par, big shout out to NASCAR for going above and beyond, putting on two awesome races that day. So, like we said earlier, the race was delayed from Sunday to Monday due to pretty heavy rain and flooding in East Tennessee. Pretty much the whole region, even Southeast Kentucky into East Tennessee, all through there, ton of heavy rain and flooding. So, super happy they were able to get everything cleared up and have an awesome race on Monday. Early on in stage one, we had a few small pileups. People were trying to feel the track out. Even people that had ran the truck race earlier that day or ran some of the other races in the previous week were still, once they get in the Cup car, it's an entirely different beast. So they were still trying to get that under control. And it took a lot of people pretty much the entire race to really get it figured out. Some people would find a groove, try to experiment a little bit, and that would screw up their day. Kyle Busch has early trouble. We see smoke coming out of his car really early on. So, a top tier, all-time great, as much as I hate to say it, all-time great, but he is NASCAR driver, having trouble early on, having trouble getting stuff figured out, but then I guess less so with that and just more so having like normal car trouble early on in the stage. Eric Almirola spins early, so once again, I know I got the Chase Elliott hat on today, but still, big Stewart-Haas guy, and Stewart-Haas's woes kind of continue early on. We see Harvick get tangled up early on. Larson, who was a favorite to win this race because of his dirt experience, he gets tangled up early on, so that was kind of a shocker to a lot of people. But then again, so much of this race is out of your control because you have so many drivers that have, minimal to no experience, not just on this track, but maybe on dirt in general. So, it's hard to blame one driver for certain mistakes because, it was absolutely wide open. But that's what made this race so great. Stage one, Truex is looking like a guy who dominated a race just hours before. As dominant as Truex was in stage one, as well as he was running, I thought he might have been a guy that could have won back-to-back races that day. It didn't happen, but just watching stage one, would not have been surprised if that's what had happened. So something you notice is people are building a groove, and you see the groove, start to go in the center of the track. It's like the lower line, the lower to the center of the track seems to be where the groove was made and found. So people are sticking with that. And you would see people like Denny Hamlin was an example. Denny Hamlin decided to go high at one point and slipped way back in the pack. So people were trying to experiment and trying to take some risks, but these were high-risk situations considering how unknown the surface was of the track and how it wore down. I think the tires held up a lot better than we anticipated, than anybody anticipated, really. Looking at the practice they had on Friday and the wear and tear they had on the tires, I think really freaked NASCAR out, freaked a lot of teams out, and made fans kind of nervous too. I was definitely thinking we were going to have big tire issues, but in the end, the tires ended up being pretty much a non-issue for most teams, so that's really good to see. Good to see them get that dirt tire, and now they're testing that they're going to start testing it on other tracks to see maybe if they can run in light rain, which they can't do on super speedways, obviously, because you'll be going so fast. That's a super high risk scenario. But they're going to try it on some of these short tracks, doing some tests with that. And I'm excited to see where that goes, to see if we didn't have to have a race completely rained out, if we just had a little bit of light rain, nothing crazy, nothing heavy. If there's lightning, they're still going to have to delay the race. But the fact that we could get some races in some light rain, it kind of sucks for the fans in attendance, but for us watching at home, A+. We don't have to see a race get delayed. So really excited to see that. I think this race is going to absolutely change the game, because looking at the fan reaction, I mean, it was a sellout. I think Curiosity sold it out alone, but I think people enjoyed it so much that it's going to sell it out again next year. And hopefully, if we continue on the trajectory of COVID, with the vaccines and everything, like people getting vaccinated, the numbers going down, hopefully we can open up, if not full capacity, even more capacity next year, because this is one that I definitely want to attend, and I know a lot of other NASCAR fans want to attend because we enjoyed it so much watching it at home. But it's a dirt race. Most dirt races are ran on a lot smaller places than Bristol. And my good buddy Hunter Collett sent me some photos that I'm going to throw up right now. And you can see, I mean, it's a dust bowl at some points. You're able to see the dust physically rising up. And once again, thank you for sending me those photos, because that's a really good actual representation. It's someone that was actually there, took these photos with their phone, and you can see the dust literally rising up into the air. But from what I understand, it didn't seem like that big of an issue. We didn't see a ton of fan backlash, a lot of complaints about, people saying they were just, choking on the dust and everything. I noticed they blocked off quite a few rows, the first few rows at the track. Good call. It helps, they've got the COVID restriction anyway, so their capacity is reduced. But that way, just trying to help keep the dirt and dust off of people. But I'm sure, people still definitely got dusty being there. But still, you got to experience history, and it's just kind of part of it. You go to a dirt race at any level, just like your local dirt track, you're going to get a little dusty. It's kind of part of it. So you got to love that. A couple of things that I think made this race super interesting was drivers having to constantly adapt. You couldn't get comfortable. You might be able to get comfortable in your line, but still, it's not like a normal paved surface track to where you find your line, you run it. It's not going to change that much depending. It might change a little bit depending on the track temperature, or, when the sun goes down, changing the track temperature. But with this, the dirt is super volatile, and it's constantly changing every single lap. So you could run 2 or 3 laps perfect, think you have it figured out. The groove gets messed up because of the way people are running on it. Then you have to completely change up your game plan for that. So that made it super interesting, because drivers couldn't get comfortable, and normally this wouldn't be a good thing, but the fans weren't able to get comfortable either, because if you think your driver's running good, you couldn't settle in and get confident of like, okay, I think he's got this. I think he's running good. He's ran good for like 10 laps. I think, we can get to the lead. That was completely out the window on this. So that made that super interesting, which is not something we see at a ton of races, just because, they're on paved surfaces. So that was a huge thing the dirt did, and A+, love that. Another thing that made this race extremely interesting, it didn't matter your experience level. Like I talked about a little bit earlier, you could have ran the truck race a few hours before. The track's going to be completely different by the time they treat it and they retreat it during the competition cautions. So with the constantly changing track, you could be super experienced on dirt, but even your experience on dirt races are going to be a small fraction of the length of this race. 250 laps on dirt is crazy. So seeing people have to run 250 laps on a dirt surface, even with them, treating it every so many laps, making sure everything's good. NASCAR did an A+ job at making sure the track was, in tip-top shape the entire time for the drivers, and it made for a super interesting race, because there were these drivers like Kyle Larson, like we talked about, that have a lot of dirt experience and a lot of success on dirt, but it almost didn't matter here. And I think that's super interesting to see, because as wide open as the NASCAR season has been, we've seen so many different winners already. We've seen 2 first-time winners already this season. So looking at this, the season's already wide open, and this race was extra wide open for who could have won. So it just made for some super exciting racing. And, I get excited for most races on the schedule, but I'd been just so pumped up for this one for so long, and it just delivered. It delivered in every single way. I can't say enough awesome things about it. I really wish I had been there to see it in person, but when they announced that they're bringing it back next year, I think the entire fan base let out a sigh of relief because we were thoroughly enjoying what we were seeing, and that's going to put some butts in seats for sure. The winner is Joey Logano. So, we've got a top-tier NASCAR driver, a guy that, consistently picks up big wins, former champion. But see him pick up a dirt win at Bristol, and I wonder if, he picked up some things in the commentary booth because, he has all these utensils right in front of him in the commentary booth to check out and see, stats and things that I guess, not everyone's paying attention to, but he has to, being in the broadcast booth. So maybe that gave him a little bit of an advantage, but even then, you can't write that off to that's the reason he won that race. This was wide open. Anybody could have won it at any moment. So the Bristol Dirt race, I've been talking about it literally all season on these videos. It delivered. It's not probably been. It has been the most fun race I've watched all year, and it's only made me excited for not just the other short tracks that are going to be coming up, but just for the season in general, because the season is still absolutely wide open. Normally, even this early on in the season, you can kind of see, not just who your playoff contenders are going to be, but who your champion might be or what team is really running dominant this year. But this year, it's wide open. It's as exciting as ever, and it's a great time to be a NASCAR fan. All right, guys, I guess that does it for me this week. Decided to put out the video on Sunday this week because we've got no race today. We're going to be back with a Saturday race this coming week at Martinsville. Can't wait for that one. Happy Easter, everybody. So we've got, the NASCAR guys have the Easter weekend off to be home with their families and enjoy it. They're getting a nice little break, and I think a lot of these guys are going to need it after the intense racing they had at Bristol. They're going to need the little bit of extra time off to mentally and physically recover. So once again, thank you guys for watching. My name's Tyler. We'll be back with a video again next week. We'll be talking about Martinsville, and thank you guys so much. We'll see you next week.